Kim Hwan woke up to the sound of his mother's gentle voice calling him for breakfast. The 8-year-old boy rubbed his sleepy eyes and looked out the window of their small home on New Geneva Colony. Purple sunlight streamed through the glass, painting everything in soft lavender hues. This wasn't Earth, but it felt like home to Hwan. He had been born here among the strange crystal formations and floating plants that made this world so special. His parents, Dr. Park Min-ho and Lee Sora, were scientists who came to New Geneva to study the planet's weird and wonderful life forms. While other kids his age back on Earth were playing video games, Hwan got to explore actual alien caves filled with glowing crystals that sang when the wind blew through them. His mother would take him on her research trips, teaching him how to carefully collect samples without damaging the delicate ecosystem. "Look at this one, Hwan," his mother would say, holding up a crystal that pulsed with inner light. "It's alive, but not like animals or plants we know. It's something completely new." Hwan loved these moments with his mother. She never talked down to him like he was just a kid. She explained things in ways he could understand, making every discovery feel like a grand adventure. His father spent most days in their lab, carefully studying the alien plants they collected. Dr. Park Min-ho had discovered 3 new species of floating moss that could actually think and communicate with each other. The scientific community back on Earth was fascinated by his work. Sometimes Hwan would sit quietly in the corner of the lab, watching his father work with delicate instruments, making notes in his thick research journals. The family lived a simple, peaceful life. They had a small garden where earth vegetables grew alongside alien fruits that tasted like honey and starlight. In the evenings, they would sit together on their porch, watching the 2 moons rise over the crystal mountains. Hwan would show his parents his growing collection of singing stones, each one making a different musical note when touched. But far away, in the cold depths of space, something terrible was approaching their peaceful world. The Zephyrian hegemony controlled thousands of star systems across the galaxy. To them, humans were nothing more than annoying insects who had barely learned to crawl between the stars. Humans had only been traveling in space for about 200 years, which was like a few seconds compared to the hegemony's ancient empire. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin creatures, with grey skin and no emotions in their black eyes. They had conquered countless worlds and destroyed entire civilizations without feeling anything. To them, wiping out a species was just another day at work. Recently, human colonies across the galaxy had been refusing to pay the heavy taxes the hegemony demanded. This made the Zephyrian leaders very angry. War Commander Vextar, a cruel leader known for his brutality, received special orders from the hegemony's capital world. The message was short and horrifying. Make humans suffer by targeting what they loved most. Hit them where it hurts, the orders said. Target their young ones, break their spirit completely. Vextar smiled coldly as he read these words. He had destroyed many civilizations before, but attacking children always worked the fastest. Parents would do anything to protect their kids, even surrender their entire worlds. On New Geneva, little Hwan was completely unaware of the danger heading toward his home. He sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, arranging his collection of glowing stones in different patterns, watching how they made beautiful music together. Each stone sang a different note, and when he arranged them just right, they created melodies that sounded like nothing on Earth. Outside his window, the crystal caves hummed their ancient songs, and the floating plants danced in the gentle breeze. Everything seemed perfect and safe in Hwan's small world. His parents were working in their lab, making new discoveries that would help humans understand this beautiful planet better. But in the darkness between the stars, Zephyrian warships were already moving toward New Geneva, their weapons charged and ready. The peaceful life that Hwan and his family had built was about to be shattered forever, and the galaxy would soon learn what happened when someone threatened human children. The morning started like any other day on New Geneva. Hwan was eating breakfast with his parents when the sky suddenly filled with massive ships. At first, Dr. Park Min-ho thought they might be supply vessels bringing equipment from Earth. The ships were flying diplomatic flags, which meant they were supposed to be peaceful visitors. Maybe they're bringing new research equipment, his mother Lee Sora said, squinting at the ships through their kitchen window. But something felt wrong. The ships were too big, too dark, and they moved in, a way that reminded her of hunting predators circling their prey. Commander Kelnock stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the small human colony with cold, emotionless eyes. He had done this many times before on different worlds. The Zephyrians had perfected the art of breaking civilizations through fear. Today's mission was simple, but brutal. Kill. The children first, broadcast everything to other human colonies, and watch as the entire species crumbled in terror. "Begin the operation," Kelnock commanded in his harsh, grating voice. "Make sure every human world sees what happens when they refuse to obey us." The first plasma blasts hit the colony's main buildings without warning. Juan's cereal bowl shattered as the house shook violently. His father grabbed him while his mother rushed to the emergency communicator. The family had practiced evacuation drills, but this felt different. This felt final. "The research station," Dr. Park Min-ho shouted over the sound of explosions. "We need to get to the underground tunnels." He scooped up Juan and ran toward their lab, while Lee Sora gathered important research data. They had built emergency escape routes throughout the colony, never thinking they would actually need them. Zephyrian soldiers moved through the colony streets like a plague. They weren't interested in capturing territory or stealing resources. Their orders were specific and horrifying. Eliminate families, starting with the youngest members. Commander Kelnock had learned that destroying children broke adult humans faster than any weapon. "Broadcast everything," Kelnock ordered his communications officer. "I want every human colony to watch this. Let them see what defiance costs." The death squads moved with practiced efficiency. These weren't soldiers fighting other soldiers. These were executioners carrying out a planned massacre. They kicked down doors, searched every hiding place, and showed no mercy to anyone they found. Juan's family almost made it to the research station when plasma fire erupted around them. The building where Dr. Park Min-ho had made his amazing discoveries was being consumed by alien weapons. Lee Sora screamed as she saw other families running in panic, some carrying small children, others searching desperately for their loved ones. "The tunnel entrance," Dr. Park Min-ho yelled, pointing to a hidden door beneath their main laboratory. "Juan, you have to go down there and hide." His hands were shaking as he opened the emergency hatch that led to the underground cave system. "I want to stay with you," Juan cried, clinging to his father's shirt. The 8-year-old boy didn't understand why strangers were destroying his home, why the crystal caves had stopped singing, why everything was burning, but there was no time for explanations. Lee Sora kissed her son's forehead and pressed her husband's research datapad into the boy's small hands. "Keep this safe," she whispered. "Remember us, and remember that we love you." The last thing Juan saw before his parents pushed him into the dark tunnel was plasma fire engulfing the laboratory where his family had spent so many happy hours making discoveries together. He crawled into the darkness, clutching the datapad, while behind him he heard Commander Kelnock's voice echoing through the colony. "Find every small one. Let the galaxy watch what happens when humans think they can say no to us." The underground caves beneath New Geneva had always been Juan's favorite place to explore with his mother. Now they had become his prison and his only hope for survival. The 8-year-old boy crawled through narrow passages, his small body shaking from cold and fear. Above him, he could still hear the terrible sounds of destruction as the Zephyrian soldiers continued their hunt. Juan's mother had taught him well during their research trips together. Lee Sora had mapped these caves extensively, showing him which passages led to underground water sources and which ones connected to the surface. She had made it into a game, teaching him to read the crystal formations like road signs. Now those lessons were keeping him alive. The emergency rations his parents had stored in the tunnels tasted like cardboard, but Juan forced himself to eat small amounts to make them last. The underground streams provided fresh water, though it was so cold it made his teeth ache. At night, when the temperature dropped, he would curl up in small alcoves between the singing crystals, using their faint warmth to keep from freezing on me. The first day, Juan kept expecting to hear his parents calling his name. Every sound made him hope they had escaped and were looking for him. But as hours passed, the colony above grew quieter and quieter. Sometimes he would hear the heavy footsteps of Zephyrian soldiers searching the surface, their harsh voices echoing down through cracks in the cave ceiling. By the second day, hunger and thirst were making him dizzy. He had found a larger cave chamber where the crystals glowed brighter, providing some comfort in the endless darkness. His father's research pad still worked, and Juan would stare at the family photos stored on it, trying to remember better times when they were all together. The worst part wasn't the hunger or cold. It was the loneliness. Juan had never been alone for more than a few hours in his entire life. His parents had always been there, explaining things, keeping him safe, making him laugh. Now he was trapped in darkness, with only the soft humming of crystals for company. On the third night, exhaustion finally overcame his fear. Juan had barely slept since the attack began, jumping at every sound, terrified that the soldiers would find his hiding place. But his small body couldn't stay awake any longer. As he leaned against what he thought was just another crystal formation, his elbow accidentally pressed against a hidden panel. Suddenly, lights flickered to life around him. Ancient human technology, left behind by the first colonists who had explored these caves, hummed back to life after years of silence. Juan didn't understand what he had activated, but he could see a camera lens focusing on his face and hear electronic beeping sounds. The old emergency beacon had been designed to activate during disasters, automatically transmitting distress signals across human space. But this beacon did more than just send a help message. It recorded everything happening around it and broadcast the footage in real time to 17 different human colonies. Across the galaxy, people suddenly saw an 8-year-old boy sitting alone in a dark cave, tears streaming down his dirty face. The beacon had also recorded the attack on the colony, capturing footage of the Zephyrian massacre. Humans on distant worlds watched in horror as they saw what had happened to New Geneva. "Please help me," Juan whispered to the camera, not knowing that millions of people were watching him. "They killed my mom and dad. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, and I want to go home." The transmission showed everything: the burning research station where his parents had died, the systematic destruction of the colony, the faces of Zephyrian soldiers as they hunted for survivors, and now the terrified face of a small boy begging for help from the darkness. Commander Kelnock's sensors detected the transmission immediately. His face twisted with rage as he realized a human child had managed to broadcast evidence of their operation across the galaxy. He personally led a squad into the caves, following the signal to its source. Juan heard the heavy footsteps approaching and tried to hide, but there was nowhere to run. Kelnock appeared in the cave entrance, his weapon raised and his eyes filled with cold hatred. "No witnesses," the commander said simply, his finger moving toward the trigger. The transmission feed suddenly went dark, leaving 17 human worlds staring at static screens, knowing they had just watched a child die. The Terran Command Center had never been completely silent before. Admiral Choi Daeho stood frozen as the transmission from New Geneva played on the massive screens surrounding him. Every person in the room watched in horror as little Juan's terrified face filled the displays, his small voice echoing through the chamber as he begged for help that would never come. When the feed cut to static, the silence stretched for what felt like forever. Hardened military officers who had seen decades of combat sat with tears in their eyes. Politicians who usually argued about everything found themselves united by a rage so pure it burned like fire in their chests. Admiral Choi had served in the military for 30 years. He had fought in border conflicts, dealt with pirates, and protected human colonies from natural disasters. But he had never seen anything like this. The footage showed everything: the systematic hunting of families, the deliberate targeting of children, and finally, the murder of an 8-year-old boy whose only crime was being human. "How many people saw this?" President Han Jisoo asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. 17 colonies received the full transmission, reported Communications Director Kim Sun-ho. "But it's spreading. Every human world will have seen it within the hour." President Han stood up slowly, her face transformed by an anger that made everyone in the room step back. She had been a diplomat before becoming president, someone who believed in peaceful solutions and careful negotiations. But diplomacy had rules, and one of those rules was that you never, ever hurt children. "Total mobilization," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. No debate, no discussion, no mercy. Defense Minister Yoon Tae-jin had been waiting for this moment his entire career, though he had hoped it would never come. His fingers moved over controls that had remained untouched for decades, activating protocols that most people didn't even know existed. "Arsenal Directive is now active," he announced. "All restrictions lifted, all hidden projects authorized. For immediate deployment." The other council members nodded grimly. They all knew what the Arsenal Directive meant. For over a century, humanity had been preparing for the day when someone would threaten their survival. While they explored space and built peaceful colonies, they had also been building something else in secret. Weapons that could end entire civilizations. Admiral Choi activated his personal communicator, sending the same message to fleet commanders across human space. Code Black Execute Vengeance Protocol. Target, Zephyrian Hegemony. Rules of engagement, none. Within minutes, the message spread to every human world. On Earth, families gathered around their screens, watching the footage of Juan's final moments over and over again. On the farming colonies, workers left their fields and reported to recruitment centers. On the mining worlds, entire shifts abandoned their operations to join the growing fleet. But the most important response came from places that most humans didn't know existed. Hidden shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations suddenly revealed their true purpose. Construction facilities that claimed to build cargo ships began launching vessels designed for one thing only: war. Chief Engineer Bae Jin-hyuk stood in Shipyard 7, a massive facility hidden inside what looked like a dead moon. For 50 years, his team had been building and maintaining humanity's secret arsenal, ships that could crack planets, weapons that could extinguish stars, technology that other species would consider impossible. "Power up everything," he ordered his staff. "Every prototype, every experimental design, every weapon we swore we'd never use. Today we use them all." The workers moved with grim efficiency, activating systems that had waited in darkness for decades. These weren't exploration vessels or trade ships. These were instruments of extinction, built by a species that had learned the galaxy was a dangerous place. On Titan Station, weapons specialist Dr. Song Hye-jin watched as her life's work, devices that could rewrite the laws of physics in small areas of space, were loaded onto unmarked ships. She had created these weapons hoping they would never be needed, but knowing that someday they might be humanity's only defense. "For every child they murdered," she whispered, programming the final targeting coordinates. "For every family they destroyed, for Juan." Across human space, similar scenes played out. Secret bases revealed themselves. Hidden fleets powered up their engines. Weapons that violated every galactic treaty on warfare were loaded and armed. The galaxy had seen humanity's public face: explorers, scientists, traders, and diplomats. They had never seen humanity's hidden face, the face of a species that had survived ice ages, world wars, and nuclear weapons. A species that had learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Within 6 hours of Juan's death, humanity's true military might was moving towards Zephyrian space. The aliens had wanted to break human spirit by killing children. Instead, they had awakened something that would consume their entire civilization. The hunt was about to begin, and this time, humanity would be doing the hunting for over 100 years. The galaxy had watched humanity spread across the stars, like curious children exploring a new playground. Human ships were known for their sleek designs and peaceful missions. Human colonies grew food and conducted research. Human diplomats always talked about cooperation and friendship between species. Everyone thought they knew what humans were. Like, they were completely wrong. Deep in the asteroid fields between human worlds, massive structures that looked like simple mining platforms suddenly began to transform. What the galaxy had assumed were rock-crushing facilities revealed their true purpose. These weren't mining operations at all. They were weapons factories, hidden in plain sight for decades. Chief Engineer Bae Jin-hyuk stood on the command deck of Platform Alpha 7, watching as his life's work finally emerged from its disguise. The mining platform opened like a flower, revealing construction bays large enough to build ships the size of cities. Inside those bays, vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen began to take shape. "Initiate Project Juan," Bay ordered, his voice heavy with emotion. The engineers around him worked in respectful silence as humanity's first planet killer rolled out of its construction bay. The ship was massive, its dark hull covered in weapons that could tear apart entire worlds. But what made everyone stop and stare was the name written across its bow in letters 10 meters tall. Kim Hwan Never Forgotten. This wasn't just a warship, it was a monument to a murdered child, and a promise that his death would not go unanswered. Across human space, similar platforms revealed themselves. The Agricultural Research Station near Centauri Prime opened up to launch Starcrushers, ships equipped with weapons that could make suns explode. The communications relay in the Vega system began producing reality bombs, devices that could make entire fleets simply stop existing. Dr. Lee Minjae had spent her entire career developing these impossible weapons. While other species focused on bigger guns and stronger shields, humanity had been thinking differently. Why fight fair when you could rewrite the rules of physics itself? Her reality bombs didn't just destroy ships. They made it so those ships had never existed in the first place. Every galactic treaty forbids weapons like these, her assistant nervously reminded her as they loaded the devices onto unmarked carriers. "Treaties are for civilizations that don't murder children," Dr. Lee replied coldly. "The Zephyrians broke the only rule that really matters. Now they get to learn why humanity writes their own rules." Fleet Admiral Kim Min-seok gathered his commanders in a secure briefing room deep inside Earth's moon. The men and women around the table represented humanity's true military leadership, not the public faces who dealt with diplomatic missions, but the shadows who had been preparing for humanity's darkest hour. "For a century, we've let the galaxy think we're peaceful explorers," Admiral Kim began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We've hidden our real capabilities behind smiles and trade agreements. That ends today." He activated a holographic display showing the full extent of humanity's hidden arsenal. Ships that could crack moons like eggs, weapons that turned entire star systems into clouds of plasma, technology that made the Zephyrian military look like children playing with sticks. "We are not going to war to conquer territory," the Admiral continued, his eyes reflecting the same cold rage that had consumed every human who watched Juan die. "We are not fighting for resources or political advantage. We are going to completely erase the Zephyrian hegemony from existence." The commanders nodded grimly. They had all seen the footage from New Geneva. They had all watched an 8-year-old boy beg for help that never came. Some of them had children of their own, and the thought of what Juan had gone through made their blood burn with fury. Meanwhile, Zephyrian intelligence networks across the galaxy began experiencing something they had never encountered before: complete blindness. Human ships appeared on the edges of sensors for just a moment before vanishing again, moving through space in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Commander Kelnock, still celebrating his successful operation on New Geneva, received increasingly frantic reports from his intelligence officers. Human vessels were appearing and disappearing throughout Zephyrian space, but they didn't match any known human ship designs. These craft were larger, darker, and equipped with technology that Zephyrian sensors couldn't identify. "What are we looking at?" he demanded, staring at blurry images of massive human warships. His chief analyst shook his head in confusion. "We don't know, sir. They don't exist in any of our databases. It's like humanity has been hiding an entire second fleet that we never knew about. They had no idea how right they were and how wrong they had been about everything else." The attack began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time across 12 different star systems. One moment, Zephyrian border worlds were going about their normal day. The next moment, space itself seemed to tear open as massive human warships emerged from nowhere. There were no communication attempts, no demands for surrender, no warnings of any kind. The human fleet simply appeared and began their work. Captain Park Jaewon stood on the bridge of the battleship Vengeance, watching as her weapons locked onto the first Zephyrian military station. Her ship was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, a kilometer long, black as space itself, and covered in weapons that most species would consider impossible to build. "Target acquired," her weapons officer reported. "All systems ready." "Captain." Park thought about the footage she had seen 3 days ago. A small boy named Juan, crying alone in a dark cave, begging for help that never came. She thought about his parents, who died trying to protect him. She thought about every human child who would sleep safely tonight because of what was about to happen. "For every child they murdered," she said quietly into her communicator, knowing that captains across 12 different battles were hearing the same words, "A world dies." The Vengeance fired its main weapon, and the Zephyrian station simply stopped, existing, not destroyed, not blown apart. It was there 1 second and gone the next, as if reality itself had decided it never belonged there in the first place. The Zephyrian Fourth Fleet was considered the pride of the hegemony's military. 500 ships, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering, protected by shields that could stop any known weapon and armor that had never been penetrated in 300 years of warfare. It took exactly 17 minutes for the human fleet to turn all 500 ships into scrap metal. Admiral Velkan, commander of the Fourth Fleet, watched in disbelief as his most powerful battleships crumbled under human weapons. Their shields, which should have been able to stop anything, flickered and died as if someone had simply turned them off. Their armor plating, strong enough to survive direct hits from star-sized explosions, peeled away like paper in the wind. "How is this possible?" he screamed at his science officer. "What kind of weapons are these?" The science officer stared at his instruments in complete confusion. "Sir, I don't think these are conventional weapons at all. Our sensors show they're somehow changing the laws of physics in small areas around our ships. Our shields can't stop them because they're not really attacking us. They're making it impossible for our defenses to exist." Commander Kelnock, the same Zephyrian who had murdered Juan just days before, found himself running for his life as human ships tore through his patrol fleet. His flagship, the Dominator, was the most advanced vessel in the Zephyrian military. It had never been damaged in over 50 battles against primitive species. Now it was falling apart around him, as human weapons did things that shouldn't have been possible. Hull plating was simply vanishing. Power systems were shutting down for no reason. His crew was reporting that sections of the ship were aging hundreds of years in seconds, turning to rust and falling away. "Emergency jump," he ordered desperately. "Get us out of here." But as his ship tried to escape, he couldn't help himself. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet, his voice shaking with fear and confusion. "What are you?" he broadcast, across all frequencies. "What kind of monsters are you?" The response came from Admiral Choi Daeho himself, his voice calm and cold as winter space. "We are what happens when you hurt our young." Those words echoed across the battlefield as Kelnock's ship limped away, trailing debris and atmosphere. Around him, his entire fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that seemed to violate everything he thought he knew about warfare. On the 12 border worlds below, Zephyrian civilians looked up at the sky and watched their mighty fleets burn. Some tried to evacuate. Others sent desperate messages to the hegemony capital, begging for reinforcements. Most simply stood in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing. But humanity wasn't interested in the civilians. They weren't targeting cities or population centers. They were methodically destroying every military installation, every government building, every symbol of Zephyrian power. The message was clear. This wasn't conquest. This was erasure. Within 6 hours, 12 entire star systems had been stripped of all Zephyrian military presence. Planets that had been fortified military strongholds for centuries now floated empty in space, their defenses reduced to clouds of expanding debris. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity revealed what they truly were beneath their peaceful exterior. Not conquerors seeking territory, not warriors seeking glory, but protectors seeking justice for a murdered child. And they were just getting started. Dr. Song Hyejin had always been fascinated by ancient civilizations. As humanity's top expert on alien cultures, She spent her days studying how different species had risen and fallen throughout galactic history. But nothing had prepared her for what she found when human forces captured Zephyrian military databases. Working late into the night in her research lab aboard the command ship Justice, Dr. Song scrolled through thousands of classified hegemony documents. What she discovered made her stomach turn and her hands shake with rage. The attack on New Geneva wasn't an isolated incident or a desperate military strategy. It was standard procedure. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at her screen. The documents showed decades of similar operations across the galaxy. Species after species had faced the same horrible choice: submit to Zephyrian rule or watch their children die. The files were organized with cold efficiency. Pacification Protocol 1A targeted children between ages 5 and 10. Protocol 2B focused on pregnant females. Protocol 3C eliminated entire family units to maximize psychological damage. Each operation was documented with clinical precision, including detailed reports on how long it took different species to surrender after their young were murdered. Dr. Song found records of 43 different civilizations that had faced these protocols. Some had surrendered immediately after the first attacks on their children. Others had fought back desperately, only to watch more of their young die until they finally gave up. A few had been completely wiped out when they refused to submit, even after losing all their children. She forwarded her findings immediately to General Oh Seung-wan, commander of humanity's ground forces. The general was a veteran soldier who had seen combat on a dozen different worlds, but when he read Dr. Song's report, he had to step away from his desk and take several deep breaths. 43 species, he said to his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Kim Tae-hyun. 43 civilizations had their children murdered by these monsters, and nobody stopped them. The general opened a secure communication line to all human military commanders across the galaxy. His message was brief and absolute. New intelligence confirms the Zephyrians have been systematically murdering children for decades. Any species that participated in, supported, or enabled these operations will be treated as enemy combatants. No exceptions. Within hours, human fleets began changing course toward new targets. The Korthak Confederacy and Melody Republic had served as vassal states to the Zephyrian hegemony for over a century. They provided ships, resources, and soldiers to support hegemony operations throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Lim Nyon had been humanity's chief diplomatic representative for 15 years. She had negotiated trade agreements, resolved territorial disputes, and always believed that any conflict could be solved through careful discussion. But when the Korthak and Melody governments sent desperate surrender offers, her response shocked the entire diplomatic community. The Korthak Supreme Chancellor appeared on her screen, his insect-like features twitching with fear. "We wish to negotiate immediate surrender," he chittered nervously. "We can provide reparations, tribute, whatever humanity demands." Ambassador Lim's face remained completely expressionless as she replied. "Our databases show that Korthak ships participated in 17 different child-killing operations over the past 30 years. Korthak soldiers helped hunt down families on worlds that refused to submit to the hegemony. But we were following orders," the Chancellor protested. "We had no choice. The hegemony would have destroyed us if we refused." "You had a choice," Ambassador Lim said coldly. "You chose to help murder children rather than face the consequences of doing what was right. You watched babies die and did nothing to stop it. Your time for mercy has passed." The transmission ended, and within 12 hours human fleets arrived in Korthak space. The Melody Republic tried a different approach. Their president, a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large eyes, sent personal messages to every human leader she could contact. She offered to share all intelligence about hegemony operations, to provide safe haven for human refugees, to pay any price for peace. "We were victims too," she pleaded in her final message. "The hegemony forced us to serve them. We never wanted to hurt anyone." Dr. Song had found the truth in the captured files. Melody ships had transported Zephyrian death squads to over 20 different worlds. Melody soldiers had helped establish the prison camps where captured children were held before execution. Melody officials had helped identify which species would be most vulnerable to child-targeting operations. The human response was swift and final. 3 entire civilizations that had enabled the murder of children found themselves facing the same weapons that had destroyed the Zephyrian border worlds. But humanity didn't stop there. Dr. Song's research had revealed a network of collaboration that spread across dozens of species. Some had provided ships, others had shared intelligence, and many had simply looked the other way when they knew what was happening. General O issued new orders to human commanders. Find everyone who helped. Find everyone who knew and stayed silent. Find everyone who profited from the murder of innocents. The galaxy will learn that there are consequences for harming children, and those consequences extend to anyone who enables such crimes. The message spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Species that had served the hegemony began frantically trying to distance themselves from past actions. Some attempted to flee to distant galaxies. Others tried to hide behind diplomatic immunity or claims of ignorance. None of it mattered. Humanity had awakened something ancient and terrible, the protective fury of a species that put the safety of children above everything else. And they were just getting started. Emperor Thekmor had ruled the Zephyrian hegemony for over 300 years. He had conquered entire galaxies, enslaved thousands of species, and destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Never once in his long reign had he felt genuine fear. Until now. Standing in his war room deep within the Imperial Palace, surrounded by holographic displays showing the systematic destruction of his empire, Thekmor watched his military commanders scramble for solutions that didn't exist. Human fleets were moving through hegemony space like a plague, erasing everything in their path with weapons that seemed to come from nightmares. Deploy the Crimson Death, he ordered his chief scientist, Dr. Zix Thara. The Crimson Death was a biological weapon that had wiped out entire species in the past. It was designed to target the specific genetic markers that all humanoid life forms shared, turning their own immune systems against them. Dr. Zixathara activated the weapon, releasing billions of microscopic plague organisms toward human fleet positions. The aliens watched eagerly as their sensors detected the plague making contact with human ships. Nothing happened. Impossible, Thekmor snarled. No species has ever survived the Crimson Death, but humanity had been preparing for biological warfare for decades. Every human ship was equipped with medical systems that could analyze and counter unknown diseases within minutes. More importantly, genetic modifications developed over generations of space travel had given humans immunity to most alien pathogens. The Emperor's next move was even more desperate. He activated the hegemony's reality warping technology, ancient devices that could change the laws of physics in small areas of space. These weapons had been used to collapse stars, create artificial black holes, and erase entire fleets from existence. The reality warpers fired at the approaching human ships, attempting to make them simply stop existing. But again, nothing happened. Humanity's scientists had been studying Zephyrian technology for decades through captured alien ships and stolen data. They had developed countermeasures for weapons that most species didn't even know existed. In growing panic, Thekmor ordered attacks on human colonies themselves. If he couldn't destroy their fleets, maybe he could force them to stop by threatening their civilian populations. Massive Zephyrian battle groups moved toward Earth, Mars, and the major human worlds. They never made it. Defense systems that had been hidden for over a century suddenly revealed themselves. Weapon platforms disguised as space stations opened. Fire with technology that turned Zephyrian ships into clouds of atoms. Force fields that could stop planet-killing weapons protected every human world. The Emperor realized that humanity had been preparing for this war since their first contact with alien civilizations. How is this possible? Thekmor demanded of his intelligence chief. Our reports said humans were peaceful explorers. Where did all this military technology come from? His advisor shook his head helplessly. We were wrong about everything, Your Majesty. Humans have been building weapons in secret for generations. They let us think they were weak while they prepared to destroy us. As human fleets closed in on the hegemony's core worlds, Emperor Thekmor made a decision that would have been impossible for him just weeks before. For the first time in his life, he would surrender. War Marshal Jung Mi-young was humanity's most experienced military diplomat. She had negotiated ceasefires, prisoner exchanges, and territorial agreements throughout her career. When the Emperor's desperate transmission reached human command, she was chosen to receive his surrender offer. Thekmor's holographic image appeared before her, and Jung Mi-young was shocked by what she saw. The mighty Emperor, who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, was trembling like a frightened child. His hands shook as he spoke, his voice cracking with desperation. "We submit," he said, his proud voice reduced to a whisper. "The hegemony surrenders. Completely. Name your terms. We will pay any price, accept any conditions, surrender any territory you demand." War Marshal Jung looked at the alien Emperor with cold contempt. She thought about little Juan, crying alone in a dark cave. She thought about all the other children whose lives had been destroyed by this creature's orders. "I will relay your message to Admiral Choi," she said simply, then cut the transmission. Admiral Choi's response was broadcast not just to the Emperor, but across the entire galaxy. Every species, every world, every civilization heard humanity's final judgment on the Zephyrian hegemony. 3 days ago, you murdered an 8-year-old boy named Kim Hwan, Admiral Choi said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Before that, you murdered children belonging to 43 different species across this galaxy. Our terms were simple from the beginning. Don't murder children. You refused. You chose to target the most innocent and defenseless beings in the universe. Now you face the consequences. The transmission ended and human fleets moved toward the hegemony's homeworld. Emperor Thekmor watched from his palace as humanity's final weapon approached his planet. It wasn't a conventional bomb or energy weapon. It was something far worse. A device that unraveled the atomic bonds holding matter together. The last thing the Emperor saw was his homeworld beginning to crack like an eggshell, reality itself coming apart as humanity's ultimate weapon completed its work. Within minutes, the planet that had ruled 10,000 worlds became nothing more than dust, drifting in space. 6 months had passed since the day that changed everything. Where the mighty Zephyrian homeworld once stood, there was now only an asteroid field drifting silently through space. But floating among the debris was something that made every passing ship slow down and stare. A massive monument made of black stone and gleaming metal. The inscription was written in hundreds of different languages, so that every species in the galaxy could read and understand its message. Here lies a civilization that forgot children are sacred. May their fate serve as a warning to all who would harm the innocent. The monument wasn't built by humans. It was constructed by the liberated worlds themselves, planets that had suffered under Zephyrian rule for centuries and wanted to ensure that no one would ever forget what happened when someone crossed humanity's most important line. Chancellor Im Yoonji stood in the newly constructed Galactic Council chambers, addressing representatives from over 3,000 worlds. These were the former slaves, vassals, and conquered territories of the Zephyrian hegemony, now free to govern themselves under humanity's protection. "Today we establish the Juan Protocols," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the galaxy through quantum communication networks. The protocols were named after the little boy whose death had sparked the greatest military response in galactic history. The rules were simple and absolute. Any species, government, or organization that deliberately targeted human civilians, especially children, would face immediate and total extinction. No warnings, no negotiations, no second chances. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of when their young were threatened, and no one wanted to test those limits again. Dr. Park Sun-woo, the new director of Galactic Affairs, explained the protocols to a gathering of alien ambassadors. "We don't want to rule you," she said calmly. "We don't want your resources, your territory, or your submission. We want one thing, for children to be safe. Any children, anywhere in the galaxy, make sure they are, and we'll be the best neighbors you could ask for. Harm them, and you'll discover why the Zephyrian hegemony no longer exists." The transformation of galactic politics was remarkable. Species that had spent millennia fighting each other suddenly found common ground in protecting their young. Trade flourished between worlds that had never cooperated before. Scientific research accelerated as civilizations shared knowledge freely, knowing that humanity's protection made exploration and discovery safe again. But the most important change was in how the galaxy treated its children. Planets that had never cared about child welfare suddenly established protection services. Species that had considered their young expendable began building schools and hospitals. The concept of deliberately harming children became so unthinkable that most languages developed new words to express the horror of such acts. On Earth, in a quiet cemetery overlooking the city where his grandparents had lived, Kim Hwan was finally laid to rest. His parents' bodies had been recovered from New Geneva and brought home, but the memorial service was for more than just one family. It was for every child who had died under Zephyrian rule, and a promise to every child who would be born in the future. President Han Jisoo stood at the podium, looking out at the thousands of people who had come to pay their respects. Representatives from hundreds of different species stood alongside human families united in grief and determination. Hwan was 8 years old, she began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. He loved exploring caves with his mother and collecting singing stones. He wanted to be a scientist like his parents. He should have grown up to discover new worlds and make friends with alien children from across the galaxy. She paused, looking up at the stars that were visible even in the daylight sky. We are not conquerors. We never wanted to rule anyone or control anything. We are protectors of our own children and of every innocent life in this galaxy, but make no mistake about our resolve. We will end entire civilizations to keep our children safe. We will cross any line, break any rule, and face any consequence to ensure that what happened to Hwan never happens again. The memorial service ended with the planting of a tree, a small sapling that would grow over the decades to come, its branches reaching toward the stars. Children from dozens of different species helped place soil around its roots, their different hands working together to nurture new life. Across the galaxy, similar trees were planted on thousands of worlds. Each one carried the same message: children are sacred, their protection is absolute, and anyone who forgets this truth will face the consequences that the Zephyrian hegemony discovered too late. The galaxy remembered Kim Hwan, and in remembering him, it learned to protect all the children who would come after.